In the seemingly peaceful Sunday morning within a small garden, a 4-year-old boy trembles, clinging to his mother's hand, begging her not to open the door to the old wooden shed. But when the door creaks open, amidst the scent of damp wood and dim light, a newborn baby appears swaddled in a blanket, sleeping soundly, like a secret yet to be spoken. And from that moment on, everything the mother thought she had lost begins to find its way back. Sunday morning dawns with a gentle ray of sunlight touching the plum tree branches in front of the porch. The small, pale green house nestles amongst the vibrant garden. Lillian stands, bent over the newly blooming silver dichondra patch, gloved hands, meticulously tending the soil with a small spade. She wears an old, well-worn shirt, her hair pulled back into a neat bun, sweat beading on her forehead, yet her expression remains serene. Since her husband left, this garden is the only place where she feels everything is still within her control, something she can nurture, adjust, and make bloom as she wishes. A child's laughter echoes from somewhere behind the lavender bushes. "Mummy, I'm a herbivorous dinosaur," Caleb shouts, his young voice full of pride. Lillian looks up, catching sight of the boy crawling clumsily on the grass. A green paper hat cut jaggedly like dinosaur teeth perched on his head, his hands waving as front legs. "Yes, but remember to eat only grass, not Mommy's flowers." Caleb laughs, then suddenly changes direction, running towards the shed at the corner of the garden. But after only a few steps, he stops short, looking back at his mother. "Mummy, are you thirsty? Should I get you some orange juice?" Lillian is slightly surprised. Usually, the little one never volunteers to do anything without candy as a reward. "No need, honey. Mummy still has some things to finish out here." Caleb hesitates for a moment, then changes tactics again. He runs over and clings to his mother's hand. "Mummy, let's play hide and seek. You hide first, and I'll count." "Caleb, let Mommy finish this flower patch first." Lillian's voice is gentle, but her eyes remain fixed on the small wooden shed next to the fence, a place she hasn't touched in weeks. Since Tom left, the shed has become a temporary corner for everything she doesn't know what to do with. Boxes of books, old tools, broken chairs, and memories she doesn't have the strength to touch. Today, for some reason, she feels she should start cleaning it out. Caleb suddenly falls with a thud onto the grass, his face contorted. "Ow, Mummy, my leg. It hurts so much." Lillian frowns, quickly bending down to check. There are no scratches on Caleb's knee, but the boy clings to her as if trying to hold her back. "Caleb, what's wrong, honey?" The boy shakes his head frantically. "Nothing. I just don't want you to go into the shed." A small silence passes. Lillian sits down completely, looking directly into her son's eyes. "Why don't you want me to go in?" Caleb purses his lips, lowering his head, his little hands clutching his mother's hem tightly. Lillian looks up, instinctively glancing towards the shed door. Something flashes in her gaze, a corner of a grey woolen blanket peeking out from the crack in the door. Her heart skips a beat. She stands up, slowly walking towards it. Caleb hurriedly pulls at his mother's hand, tears welling up in his eyes. "Mummy, please don't. I beg you." But Lillian has already placed her hand on the wooden doorknob. Click. The door opens, the hinges creaking softly in the wind. The smell of old wood and damp dust hits her nose. The dim light filtering through the small, cobweb-covered window shines into the middle of the shed, where a large cardboard box, lined with blankets and cushions, sits. Lillian freezes. A newborn baby, still red-faced, lies sleeping soundly inside. Her face is rosy, her eyes closed, her tiny hands curled up on the old blanket. Next to her is a plastic cup. Inside is a little cold milk, a white, cloudy film covering the surface. Lillian kneels down, her hand trembling slightly, not daring to breathe heavily. Caleb stands behind the cardboard box, his face ashen. I'm sorry. I didn't want anyone to take her away. His voice breaks, like a small shard of glass falling into Lillian's heart. She wraps her arms around her son, tightly, burying her face in his shoulder. Where did you find the baby? Caleb hesitates, tears falling silently. Yesterday, when Mommy went to the market, I heard a cat meowing. I went to the back alley, and I saw someone put her there. They ran away. There was no one. I was afraid. If I told Mommy, you'd call someone to take her away. Did you give her milk? Yes, I took my milk. She drank a little and then fell asleep. I was cold, so I took Mommy's blanket and covered her. Lillian sits still for a long time, not because of anger, not because of panic, but because she is trying to keep her heart from bursting with something too immense. Inside that tiny body is the heart of a 4-year-old child, knowing how to protect, how to sacrifice, how to fear, and be brave at the same time. Caleb, yes? You did the right thing by protecting her, but next time, if something scares you, you promise to tell Mommy. Okay? The boy nods weakly. Lillian stands up, picking up the newborn baby, gently, as if afraid to hurt a fragile ray of hope. She reaches out and strokes the baby's cheek, then looks at Caleb. We have to take her to the doctor for a checkup, but I promise, I won't let anyone take her away if she needs to stay here. Caleb grins, his smile like sunshine after rain. In Lillian's arms, the little life stirs slightly, her lips moving, as if feeling the gentle warmth surrounding her. Outside, the sun has risen higher. The birds are still singing steadily, as if nothing has happened. But in the mother's heart, a new chapter has just opened, not with pre-planned arrangements, but with a heart learning to love once more. And in Caleb's eyes, that Sunday morning will no longer be just about dinosaur games or orange juice. It is the day that the boy knows he is not just a child, but a big brother. And the shed door, from a place filled with forgotten memories, now becomes the door to a miracle, small, fragile, and unexpected. She places the baby on the cushioned chair covered with a blanket, gently lifting the fabric to look at her. The baby's skin is pale, smooth as an eggshell, her wrists and ankles tiny, but her belly is round, her skin not wrinkled, not signs of prolonged starvation. She's not malnourished. It seems someone cared for her, but then for some reason had to leave her. Lillian says softly, not sure if she's speaking to herself or to Caleb standing behind her. Caleb doesn't answer. He clutches the stuffed dinosaur tightly in his hand, his eyes fixed on the floor. His hair is wet from the rain, tangled like his emotions. Lillian looks at her son. She takes a dry towel and gently wipes Caleb's hair, then turns to wipe the baby's forehead. Doesn't the baby cry? Caleb looks up, his lips pursed, then nods. No, since I found her. She's been lying still. No crying, no moving. I thought she was sleeping, but when I touched her hand, it was warm. I was scared, so I brought her home. I covered her with a blanket, gave her milk. Whenever I didn't finish my milk, I hid it in the bottle. She only drinks a little bit. He speaks in a low voice, stumbling but steadily, as if he has practiced it in his head. Lillian says nothing more. She picks up the baby and brings her closer to Caleb, gently placing her in his arms. Do you want to try feeding her milk again? Caleb looks up, his eyes wide with surprise, then nods vigorously. Lillian goes into the kitchen, takes a small bottle of milk left over from breakfast, warms it up and brings it out. She sits down next to her son, watching Caleb's tiny hands fumbling to lift the baby's head. He is as careful as an old man, his hands trembling as he supports the fragile neck, biting his lip slightly with tension. Lillian feels her heart tighten. The baby sucks gently. Not quickly, not greedily, but steadily. Every time the milk touches her mouth, her cheeks flutter, the sound of swallowing as soft as falling leaves. Caleb breathes a sigh of relief, his eyes shining with a discreet joy, unspoken. A little later, when the bottle is almost empty, Lillian wipes the baby's mouth and leans back in the chair, looking out the window. It's still drizzling, the branches outside the porch swaying gently like combs brushing the water's surface. "What do you think her name is?" Lillian asks, her voice as gentle as the rain. Caleb is startled. He turns to look at the baby, then back at his mother, his eyes blinking. "I don't know. I haven't thought about it. Every name has a reason. Maybe it's the first feeling we have, or something we hope she has, or just because it's beautiful." Caleb hugs the dinosaur tightly to his chest, then looks up, his voice so soft it's almost a whisper. "Sunny." Lillian tilts her head. "Sunny." Caleb nods. "Because she's like sunshine, bright but not dazzling, and I feel warm." Lillian smiles slightly, strokes Caleb's hair, and turns back to look at the baby lying still, her mouth open after feeding, her breath even and small, like the sound of wind through a crack in the door. She leans down, picks Sunny up, letting her lie comfortably in her arms. The feeling is feather light, but full and heavy, like holding a thin ray of light that the world had forgotten. Then she looks at Caleb, her eyes glistening, but not letting tears fall. "You are the one who brought the sunshine back into Mummy's house." Caleb purses his lips, his brown eyes widening, then bursts out laughing, not loud, not boisterous, just a gleam, flickering in his rain-wet pupils. In that moment, Lillian sees clearly. Her 4-year-old son, the child who usually plays alone, talks to superheroes and birds, is no longer just Mommy's son. He is a complete individual, knowing how to love, how to lose, and how to save the most fragile thing in life. She doesn't ask anything more. No need to know who Sunny's biological parents are, why they left her. Those questions will come later, along with reality, along with the legal decisions she is not yet mentally prepared to think about. For now, there are only the three of them, a woman learning how to believe in kindness again, a smart, sensitive boy, and a newly named life. Sunny. The name is like a tiny seed. If someone cares for it, it will bloom. If someone believes, it will shine. On the shelf, the pendulum clock strikes a deep chime. Lillian stands up, takes another thin blanket, and covers the two children. Caleb has fallen asleep next to Sunny, his hand still wrapped around her leg, as if afraid she will disappear. The house seems to change its rhythm of breathing. Not faster, not exactly slower, just different. The sound of hammering from the distant construction site at dawn is no longer the only thing that breaks the silence. Now, the delicate sounds, the soft rustling of turning over, the puffing breath like a young bird, or even the splashing of milk from the plastic bottle are enough to make the woman in the kitchen look up and listen. Lillian wraps half a loaf of bread in a cloth, her hands still covered in flour crumbs. On the table are two small bowls, one used, the other waiting to cool. She glances at the living room, where Caleb is sitting cross-legged on the carpet, one hand hugging the dinosaur, the other gently placed on the baby's back. Sunny sleeps in the circle of stuffed animals, a circle of best friends, as Caleb calls it. He says they will tell stories while she sleeps, so she can dream of forests, seas, and skies without clouds. In just one day, the two little ones have become so attached, as if Sunny is the missing part of Caleb all along. Lillian finishes cleaning the table, takes the worn cloth bag that has been neatly placed in the wicker basket. The bag that was wrapped around Sunny the day before, now dry and clean. The sour smell of old milk lingering somewhere in the seams. She puts it on her lap, opening it again, not expecting anything, but still wanting to be sure. No papers. No name-embroidered buttons. Just an old woolen blanket, the stitches uneven, a few threads coming loose at the edge on the cream background, are green dots, darkening towards the border. Lillian gazes at the blanket for a long time, not because of its beauty, but because it has something familiar. Not exactly that she has seen it before, but like a kind of care, a hand that learned to knit from a tutorial video on the internet, not skillful, but very effortful. She takes a picture of the blanket, then opens her contacts, dials Dr. Margie's number, the old midwife who lives 2 blocks away, who has delivered countless women around the area for over 30 years. Hello? Margie's voice is still deep, like every time she reads out the name of a medicine. Aunt Margie. It's Lillian. Ah, Caleb's mother. What's the matter, dear? Lillian hesitates. Auntie, have you heard of anyone recently giving birth and something strange happening? I mean, someone not registering the birth or suddenly disappearing. There is a short silence. Why? Are you looking for someone? Not exactly looking. It's just, there's a baby. Someone left her behind. I'm trying to understand, a little, about her circumstances. Margie breathes out, her voice dropping. In life, not everyone who gives birth is ready to be a mother. But at least, leaving her alive, that mother has tried in some way. Take a picture of that blanket and the baby. Send it to me, and let me take a look. Lillian does as she is told. Margie promises to look and think carefully. The call ends, but her heart doesn't feel lighter. Meanwhile, Caleb is still sitting next to Sunny, busily tying a ribbon around the teddy bear's neck. The ribbon is yellow. He says it's a sunshine string, so the baby knows the day is bright, even if it's raining. Mummy. Yes? I was going to tell her the story of the 3 little mice, but I forgot the ending. Can I make it up? Of course you can, as long as you think it's good. Caleb smiles slightly, then whispers something in Sunny's ear that no one can hear. Only his lips move, and his little hand pats lightly on her shoulder. Lillian stands still at the doorway. The feeling in her chest is like someone has lit a match, warm, bright, but also easily extinguished. Light, she thinks, never stays still. It always carries the question, keep it, or let it go. As it gets dark, she makes a pot of jasmine tea, takes it out, and sits on the porch. The afternoon rain has only left the smell of wet earth and long streaks of water on the wooden railing. She pulls her coat tighter, but her heart can't close. Behind the glass of the window, Caleb is sleeping, curled up on the sofa, his head resting on his mother's lap. Sunny is lying next to him, round as an unbaked ball of dough. She looks at the phone screen that has lit up. The message is written, I want to report a baby that has been abandoned. Her finger slides lightly to the send button, but doesn't press it. There is the sound of small feet tapping on the wooden floor. Caleb shuffles out, carrying a thin blanket. He doesn't say anything, just goes over, wraps the blanket around his mother's legs, and rests his head on her lap. If Mommy's cold, he says, his eyes still closed, then I'll wrap sunshine around you. Lillian bites her lip, puts the phone aside. Her finger touches her son's head, gently running through his soft hair. In moments like these, reason recedes, silent. Not because it is weak, but because the heart sometimes needs to be still to hear more clearly the lightest things, breath, children's hands, or simply the meaning of a blanket wrapped around your legs. She picks up the phone again. deletes the message, and whispers, "Just one more night, Sonny. I want to understand you more. Then I'll know what to do." Gentle light falls on the canvas-covered chair, touching Lillian's hem as she sits quietly in the living room. Caleb is building a fort out of pillows, Sonny sleeping in a fabric cradle next to her mother's feet. In that small silence, Lillian opens the fabric box containing the things she keeps, especially for Sonny. She takes out the woolen blanket that was once wrapped around her. This time, not just looking, but looking more closely, her eyes stop at the edge of the blanket. The patterns that seemed meaningless suddenly become clear in the slanting sunlight. A pale yellow circle, like the sun children draw with tiny rays swirling around it, and between them are small flowers, only the size of a fingertip, like daisies. Uneven, not industrial. The crochet stitches are uneven, slightly taut at the beginning, drooping towards the end, the kind of stitching of someone new to the craft, but trying their best with every stitch. She gently rotates the edge of the blanket. One corner is folded back. There is a piece of thread of a different color, light green, tied hastily like a hook. There are no labels. Lillian stands up, holding the blanket, goes into the kitchen. Caleb looks up. "Mummy, where are you taking my sister's blanket?" "Her blanket needs to tell its story," she says, her voice as light as a door ajar. The town's main street always has a distinctive smell, a mix of waffles baking from Glover's shop, and the old smell of medicine wafting from the pharmacy on the corner. Lillian pulls the car over to the side of the road in front of the old laundry next to the white wooden church. The sign is faded by the sun. Ethel's Laundry, laundering with the memory of God. She hasn't been in here much. She washes most things at home. But this morning, when she looked at the blanket, she remembered someone once joking, "Ethel can remember who washed that blanket 10 years ago, as long as they speak kindly." The door opens, the bell ringing softly. Inside the shop is the smell of detergent, steam, and something old, maybe linen that hasn't been used in a long time. Mrs. Ethel is standing behind the counter, her old round glasses perched on her nose, her hands folding an embroidered pillowcase. "Here to wash clothes or ask questions," she says, without looking up. "Both, if possible." She looks up. Her eyes are grey, but not dim. Lillian puts the blanket down on the counter, carefully as if it were evidence in a case. "Do you remember anyone bringing this kind of blanket here before? I know it's a little vague." Ethel picks up the blanket, examining it. She smells it, pulls at the edge of the fabric, touches the crochet. A moment later, she looks up. 2 weeks ago. A thin woman, hunched shoulders, skin as pale as a half-painted wall. She carried a fabric bag with these kinds of blankets, rough but clean. She didn't wait for it to be washed, said she would come back, but then never did. Lillian feels her heart tighten. "Do you remember anything else?" Ethel touches her forehead, as if taking something from the drawer of memory. "She was with a little girl, a little younger than your daughter, wearing a pink cat backpack, as silent as a statue. When I asked, the little one didn't say anything, just looked at me as if I were from the moon. Did they leave a phone number or address?" "Number. But when she left, she spoke to someone on the phone. I only heard bits and pieces. Something like boarding house behind the train station, room 11 or 12 or something. A little vague. But this old woman still remembers." Lillian writes it down quickly in her notebook, thanks her, and leaves the shop, the blanket now much heavier than when she walked in. On the way home, the clouds pull together in a long strip, like a wisp of smoke over the car. The wind blows into the window. The smell of wet grass wafts into the car, mixed with the breath of silence. Caleb is in the back seat, hugging the dinosaur, looking out. "Mum," he calls, without turning around. "What is it, honey? Have you found her home yet?" Lillian doesn't answer immediately. She thinks for a long time, as if driving in that question. "Maybe I'm about to find it. But I'm hoping, if I find it, they will love her as you do." Caleb sits still. He doesn't ask anything more, but the look in his eyes in the rearview mirror has softened, as if he understands better than anyone that sometimes finding doesn't mean belonging. That night when Caleb is asleep, Lillian opens the small notebook again, adds a line, "Woman, pale, 6-year-old girl, train station, room 11. The woolen blanket lies next to it. She picks it up again, this time no longer seeing it as evidence, but as a tangible connection to someone out there, someone who may be hiding or desperate. Whatever it is, they once held Sunny in their arms, long enough to crochet a blanket, trying hard enough to keep her alive, until that day. The person who left her may have been wrong, but the hands that crocheted this blanket, whether trembling or weak, once loved. Somewhere, the old train station is still sleeping under the faded yellow light, and behind it, that boarding house, no name, no sign, inconspicuous, is waiting for a knock on the door. Lillian's small car stopped on the side of the uneven stone road. The sky was grey, the wind dry, and the dust swirled. Ahead was a row of old boarding houses nestled behind the train station, hiding like a memory tucked away in a drawer that hadn't been opened in a long time. Caleb sat in the back seat, his face pressed against the window. In his arms was Sunny, curled in the light fabric blanket. Her eyes closed peacefully, as if the world outside didn't exist. "Where are we going, Mommy?" "A place Mommy needs to ask a few things." Caleb nodded and followed his mother. Lillian got out, carrying Sunny in her arms. Caleb followed closely, his feet moving slowly to avoid slipping on the damp moss underfoot. She had never been here before. The row of boarding houses behind the station was the kind of place no one recommended, and no one mentioned, unless they had to remember. On one side was the train track trembling under metal wheels. On the other was a rusty fence, behind which was a wasteland of grass, completely empty. The walls were patchy. Some of the windows had broken glass, patched up with cardboard. A man sat in the hallway, wearing flip-flops, holding a half-smoked cigarette. His eyes narrowed when he saw Lillian approaching. "What are you doing here?" "I'm trying to ask, has anyone ever rented a room here, a thin woman, with a young girl? About 2 weeks ago." He puffed out smoke, pondered. "Room 7. I think that woman was there, not sure. Didn't talk much. No one here remembers each other's names. Only remembers who hasn't paid." Another person peeked out from inside an old woman in an old robe, her hair disheveled, nodding as if confirming. "Yeah, I saw those two. The little girl wore a pink backpack, looked gentle. But that woman, like her battery was dead. Walking like a ghost, not paying attention to anyone." Lillian thanked them, her hand tightening on the arm holding Sunny. They continued on, walking through the dark hallways, where the rare light shone down from the flickering ceiling lights. Room 7 was at the end of the row. The door was ajar. The lock was broken, as if someone had left in too much of a hurry. She walked in. The room was small, the ceiling low, the smell of dampness attacking immediately. There was only a thin mattress on the floor, a towel crumpled in the corner, and a few bare footprints on the peeling cement floor. On the windowsill was a small piece of paper, folded in half, the edges curled by the wind. Lillian picked it up. The paper was torn from a notebook, the handwriting scrawled in smudged ink. "Sister B, don't look for me anymore." No name, no explanation. Caleb clung to his mother's hem, his voice so small it seemed the wind carried it away. "Mum, is that Sunny's mother? Lillian knelt down. She didn't know how to answer. Every word she thought of fell in her head before it reached her mouth. "Mom, I'm not sure, but if it is, then maybe that person is having a very hard time, or is even in danger." Caleb lowered his head. He looked at Sunny, then asked, more slowly, like a question for himself, "If she's her mother, then why did she leave her alone?" Lillian didn't answer. She just put her hand on Caleb's head, holding him close. There are some questions that only adults know, have no answers or have, but are too painful to say. They walked out of the room. No one said anything more. On the way home, Lillian stopped the car on the side of the road next to an old poplar tree shedding leaves. She turned on her phone, intending to call the social services agency. She intended to press, but her hand stopped there. Not because she was hesitant, but because something had just arisen in her heart, a kind of fragile belief that if someone really did abandon Sunny, then they had also lost something big enough to make themselves have no choice. Someone who leaves is not always someone who no longer loves. In the evening, in the kitchen that smelled of honeyed oranges, Caleb sat drawing with crayons. He chose yellow for the circle of the sun, but the outline was purple. "The sun isn't purple, honey," Lillian said while washing the dishes. Caleb replied, without looking up, "If she's sad, then the sun is also sad. But it still shines." Lillian stopped, looking out the window. The darkness outside was not as scary as the feeling that someone, even close by, was still drifting away little by little. At night, after rocking Caleb to sleep, she sat on the edge of the bed, looking at Sunny. The baby was still sleeping peacefully, her hands spread slightly, her palms facing up on the blanket. Lillian stroked the baby's cheek. Every movement was like a promise in her heart. In her heart, for the first time, the thing that had been quietly flowing in her subconscious appeared clearly. Maybe she had started to love this baby not because she wanted to save her, but because she herself was being saved. On the dining table, amidst the half-eaten piece of bread and the forgotten glass of milk, scattered drawings lay with crayons, white paper, streaked with red, blue, purple, and yellow. Caleb draws every day, as regularly as people keep a diary, but with images instead of words. Sometimes he draws Sunny riding clouds around the roof. On other days, he draws 3 people eating ice cream under a big tree, a tree so tall it touches the edge of the sky. Mostly it's spontaneous. Whatever color is nearby he uses. The characters don't have enough fingers. The sun always has a radiant, smiling face. Lillian still keeps the habit of clearing the table after breakfast, but that day, when gathering the drawings to fold them, she stopped halfway. On the orange piece of paper, a house appeared more clearly than ever before. Not a beautiful drawing. Caleb is still a 4-year-old boy, but the composition had something repeating. 2 chimneys, a sloping roof, a rickety fence, and a blue door. She flipped through a few more pieces. She saw it again. Even though the surrounding scenery changed, whether it was sunny or rainy, that house still stood there, in the same corner, with the 2 chimneys never off. "Did you draw this from your imagination?" Lillian asked, when Caleb was lying sprawled on the carpet, playing rescuing teddy bears from the volcano. The boy looked up, his hair disheveled like a bird's nest. "Number. When I draw many houses, Sunny keeps looking at this one with the chimney. And the blue door. She keeps looking, then smiling." He sat up, as if remembering something. "One day I tried to draw something different. She didn't smile. But when I drew the house with the 2 chimneys again, she touched it." Lillian was silent, picking up the drawing again. She looked closely at the details. The arched door, the 2 uneven chimneys, behind which was a large tree drawn with a broken-headed brown crayon. Nothing special, But there was a kind of feeling, almost real. Not a dream, but a memory. Not of Caleb, but of a baby who can't talk. Lillian spent that whole afternoon browsing Google Maps, zooming in on each suburban residential area, searching by memory. In her head was a superimposition of many things: faded red roof tiles, grey poplar trees, and a moss-stained house wall. Finally, she decided to print out a few copies of the drawing. She wasn't sure where this would lead, but she knew one thing. If Sunny remembered this house, then that was where she began. On the way to the southern part of town, Caleb hugged Sunny in the back of the car. He whispered something to her, occasionally making her laugh. Sunny's smile was very quiet, not audible, but her eyes were as bright as when a window had just been opened after a winter. Lillian stopped at a roadside market, asked a few vegetable sellers, then continued along the dirt road leading to the flower farm. The houses along the road were low, wooden walls, old corrugated iron roofs. Some houses were closed, some were drying blankets. A woman trimming pots of white chrysanthemums looked up when Lillian stopped the car. Her hands were still holding scissors, a fabric hat covering almost half her face. "Who are you looking for?" "I'm inquiring about a kind of house like this." Lillian held out the printout of Caleb's drawing. The woman frowned, pulled her reading glasses out of her collar, looked at the painting for so long that Lillian thought she hadn't recognized anything. But then, she slowly nodded. The house with the 2 chimneys, on the other side of the road, behind that fern fence. It used to belong to someone named Bianca, who lived with her daughter. About a year ago they moved here. Recently I heard she gave birth to a little one, then moved away suddenly. Didn't say a word to anyone. Do you know where they went? If you asked me 3 years ago, maybe I would. Now, they're like the wind. Arrive quickly, leave quietly. Lillian bowed her head to thank her. In her heart, a new string seemed to be pulled tight. Bianca. That name carried something quiet, old, but not disconnected. It had rhythm. It had life. When she got home, Caleb flipped through the drawing again, holding it out in front of Sunny, as if trying one last time to see if his imagination had tricked him. Sunny was lying on the cushioned chair, holding a small toy in her hand. But when the picture was held out, she stopped. Her eyes widened. And then, what happened made both Lillian and Caleb hold their breath. Sunny reached out and touched the chimney on the left, touched the blue line, even though the print was only faintly toned. Her small hand sucked into the air, and then put it on the picture again, once more. No smiling, no crying, just recognizing, as if something in her head had never forgotten, just hadn't had a picture to name it. Lillian sat down next to her son. She didn't say anything, just looked at those round, wide eyes and felt her heart opening too. Someone once said, "Memory is home." Even if it's torn, even if it's leaking, our hearts still go back there first. That night, when Caleb fell asleep with crayons in his hand, Lillian wrote a line in her notebook. Bianca, row of houses behind the flower farm, has given birth. Could be Sunny's mother. Under that line, she drew a small door. Blue, exactly like in the picture, and beside it, she wrote a whisper that she didn't send anywhere. "If that's your home, then I will find the way back for you." The air of the southern suburbs always has the smell of wet grass, not the sweet scent of a newly cut field, but the smell that has soaked into the soil for a long time, warm and patient, like the deep breath of someone who has lived their whole life in silence. Lillian's car rolled slowly along the dirt path leading to the old row of houses next to the flower farm. The sun hadn't risen completely. Only a thin strip of light gleamed along the horizon, casting an orange color on the red roof tiles that had peeled off. She stopped the car, looking through the ferns rustling in the early morning breeze. Caleb sat in the back, hugging Sunny, his head leaning against the window, his eyes sleepy but still curious. "Mommy, is this my sister's place? Maybe it's where she used to live, honey." The answer drifted out as lightly as smoke, but inside, Lillian was a land cracking open where she both hoped and feared what she would witness. The caretaker of the houses was a thin old man, his skin pale, as if he had lived too long with cigarettes and weak coffee. He opened the room with a dangling bunch of keys, nodding when he heard the name, Bianca. She lived very quietly, rented number 3 at the beginning of the row near the flower patch. Was pregnant when she moved in. Didn't befriend anyone. Every time she left the house, she hunched over, as if afraid of being caught by someone. Did she leave anything behind? Not much. There are a few things I gathered together, planning to donate. But if you need, then take a look. They walked along the patchy brick pavement, the sound of footsteps mixed with the wind sweeping through the flower farm in the distance. On each windowsill was a sign of moss and dust. Some seemingly hadn't been opened all season. House number 3 appeared, the door frame off the hinges, the blue paint faded. Nothing unusual, but it still made Lillian's heart beat faster as she walked in. The air in the old room smelled of damp cloth, rotting wood, and unfinished memories. A broken-legged chair lay overturned. The small mattress in the corner was covered with a worn blanket. Caleb, as soon as he entered, ran to the corner of the wall. "Mom, look at this." The boy pointed to a low wall where there were pale yellow crayon marks, a misshapen circle and short rays drawn around it, a leaning, simple, smiling sun. Exactly like I draw, exactly the same. Lillian walked over, squatted down. The crayon smeared from the handprints, still retaining a little yellow dust. She touched the drawing, fell silent. The feeling was no different than touching a wound that had dried blood, no longer painful, but still sore. The caretaker silently left the room, leaving Lillian and the 2 children inside. On the small wooden table placed against the wall, amidst a few old invoices and a broken-lidded pencil box, was a soft-cover notebook. The cover was scratched, the first few pages stained, but between the unfinished pages, Lillian came across the trembling words, as if written in haste. "If I'm not okay, give her to Sister B. Don't let anyone know." Lillian read those words again and again. She felt like she was standing in front of a door about to open, but with no doorknob. Sister B, the woman in the hospital that Mara had mentioned, or a relative, a single point of support that Bianca thought of in desperation. "Mum, who wrote this?" Caleb had come to her side. In his hand was a bent plastic spoon, as old as the room itself. Mum thinks it's Sunny's mother. So, her mother wants to give her to someone else. That question wasn't like an arrow, but like a towel touching a cut gentle, but aching dully. Lillian looked up, looking at Caleb for a long time. Maybe that person is trying to keep her safe, even in a way that is very hard for us to understand. On the way back, the flower farm in the distance had begun to welcome the sun. The rows of brilliant yellow chrysanthemums swayed, peeking behind the green fence, like 1,000 small eyes watching. Lillian held the notebook in her heart, flipping back and forth to that line of words. She didn't know where Bianca was now, whether she was alive or had left, whether she still held something in her heart or had let go of everything. But she knew one thing clearly. No one leaves a baby with such a line of instructions if there isn't at least a sliver of light left in their heart. That night, Caleb drew a new picture. In the picture was a garden full of chrysanthemums and 3 people standing in the middle. Sunny lay sleeping next to him, her small hand still holding the blue crayon. Lillian sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, looking at her two children. No paperwork, no confirmation. Love, if deep enough, will find a way not to be called by the wrong name. And if a sun drawn messily on the wall can touch someone's heart, then perhaps, in the most fragile things, there is still something that is real. The visiting room of Pine Hill Mental Hospital was nestled between two old buildings painted white that had turned grey from rain and sun. The ceiling was high, the fan turning silently. A wall clock still ran, though the sound of the ticking hands was almost no longer heard. Lillian sat waiting on the wooden chair next to the window, where the late day's light flowed down like cold honey. In her hand was a photocopy of the words in the old notebook. "Give her to Sister B." Bethany walked in a woman in her 60s, a cream-colored nurse's uniform, round shoulders, her steps not hurried, but decisive, like someone used to taking care of things easily forgotten. "You're the one holding baby Sonny?" she asked, without beating around the bush. Lillian nodded, her hands clenching slightly. The space suddenly thickened with what had not been said. "How do you know that name?" "Bianca gave it," Bethany said, sitting down opposite. "Sonny, because Bianca was always afraid her child would grow up in the darkness like she had." Lillian was startled by the coincidence in the thinking of two people like that, even though they had never met each other, but both still gave this little angel the same name. Lillian looked up, slowly. "Have you known Bianca long?" Bethany smiled sadly. "Since she was a baby. I used to work at the Southbridge orphanage. Bianca was one of the few children who never caused trouble. But she didn't smile either, except when she hugged a stuffed animal. She called me Sister B. The name stuck from then on." A moment of silence. Then, "Why is she here?" Lillian asked. Bethany gently shook her head, her eyes seeming to sink back into an old place. "When she was pregnant, she hid it. No friends, no family. She kept the baby like she was keeping a secret that was both beautiful and scary. After giving birth, there was no one to help her, no home, no job. I tried to keep her here for treatment postpartum psychosis with signs of disorientation. But only for a few weeks. Then she ran away." Bethany nodded. "One morning the room was empty. Baby Sonny was gone. We reported it to the police, but Bianca disappeared as if she had never existed." Lillian looked down at the palm of her hand. Her fingernails pressed into her skin, but she felt no pain. She could clearly hear her heart struggling. "Did she ever say, why did she mention Sister B? Why did she only trust you?" Bethany smiled slightly, but in her eyes was something sad, like the light of a candle burning at the end of the night. "Because I was the only one who ever put my hand on her shoulder and said, 'You don't have to bear the burden of guilt because others have abandoned you.' I think, later, she believed if things got beyond her ability to bear, she could send the baby back to me. But I had asked them if it was true that Bianca still had a 6-year-old child." Lillian asked. "No, that might be the child Bianca had taken in when she was still here. She wasn't well off either. But she must have seen that child's circumstances were similar to her own," Bethany replied with a sigh. Lillian pulled out a photo of Sonny sleeping from her pocket, gave it to Bethany. "If she ever wants to find her daughter again, I will give her back." Bethany took the photo, her fingers trembling slightly. A very long silence stretched between the two women who shared no blood, but were holding the same unfinished story. "Do you have children?" Bethany asked. "Yes, Caleb, 4 years old. Since Sonny came, he hasn't left her side." Bethany put the photo down on the table, looking at Lillian. No longer with the look of a medical professional, but with the deep gaze of someone who had witnessed, more than once, mothers struggling with love and heartbreak. Then you understand. There are times when love is not enough to keep, but it is also impossible to leave. Lillian bowed her head. That sentence was like a light scratch across her heart, not cutting through, but enough to slow down every feeling. Bethany still held the photo of Sunny, her eyes not leaving the small face in the picture. Her hand gently stroked the edge of the photo, as if touching her own past. The first time I met Bianca, she was only 7 years old, sitting huddled at the end of the hallway, holding a torn-eared, stuffed rabbit. Not speaking, not crying, just looking out the window. I put a glass of milk in her hand. She didn't drink it, just asked one question. "Will you come back?" Bethany stopped, her voice lost. I nodded. From then on, every time I was on duty, she would eat. Lillian suddenly saw clearly why Bianca had written, "Give her to Sister B." In a confusing world, trust is the first thing people lose, and if they still hold on to a piece of it, it's usually with the person who kept their first promise. "Do you think Bianca is still alive?" Lillian asked, her voice as if only enough for the two of them to hear. Bethany didn't answer immediately. She stood up, poured 2 cups of hot tea from the porcelain pot on the table, pushed 1 cup towards Lillian. "I don't know, but if she's still alive, I believe she's thinking of her child, wherever she is." Then she sighed softly, like a conclusion to a thought never spoken. A mother, no matter how broken, can still hear her child from a very far distance. Lillian took the cup of tea, feeling the warmth spread into her hands, but her heart was getting colder and colder, as if what she was about to do would require a courage that love alone might not be enough for. Leaving the hospital, it was already late afternoon. The sunlight shone through the canopy of eucalyptus trees, casting oblique shadows on the steering wheel. Caleb sat in the back, falling asleep, while hugging Sunny, the two of them, like 2 pieces silently fitted together. Lillian opened the car door, sat for a long time without starting the engine. In her head, Bethany's voice was still ringing. Bianca didn't abandon her child because she didn't love her, but because she loved her too much. She was afraid of hurting her. Love sometimes isn't about holding on tight, but about knowing you have enough strength not to let go the wrong way. The phone rang just as Lillian was folding the last baby onesie. She didn't usually do that, fold clothes after they'd been worn. But with Sunny, each little garment was like a part of time, and time was hard to leave in disarray. The screen displayed Pine Hill Hospital's number. Lillian answered the phone, her heart involuntarily beating strangely. The voice of the nurse on duty rang out, clear but not cold. "Miss Lillian, I'm the nurse on duty at Pine Hill. Sister Bethany asked me to report. Bianca has returned. She asked about baby Sunny." There was no shock, just a pause, as long as the silence before snow falls. Lillian looked down at the palm of her hand she was clenching. A wrinkle had been etched into her skin. She didn't know when. On the way to the hospital, the car drove past rows of trees on both sides, entering the season of shedding leaves. Caleb sat silently next to her, not drawing anything, not asking. The 4-year-old boy, still holding onto his mother's hem as a habit, but his gaze was much further than his age. Sunny slept in Lillian's arms. Her soft hair fell on her chin. Although she had held this baby hundreds of times this time, her arms seemed to have a space of waiting. The door to the hospital room opened without a creak. Bethany stood by the door, her expression as if she had used up all the tears in her life for other people. Bianca sat on the bed. She was thinner than Lillian had imagined, her back slightly hunched, like a sapling growing up between 2 seasons of storms. Her eyes were sunken, the dark circles as if sewn with charcoal thread. But there was one thing that was still there, that silent light in the eyes that were trembling, looking towards the three people standing in front of her. When she saw Sunny in Lillian's arms, Bianca covered her mouth with both hands. She didn't cry, but her shoulders shook in spasms like someone trying not to dissolve. Lillian walked over, put Sunny on the mattress next to Bianca. The baby opened her eyes, turned her head to look, her hand gently touching the shoulder of the young woman sitting like a stone statue. No crying, no laughter, no intimacy, no strangeness. Just a long look, long enough not to be considered unconscious. Bianca reached out her hand, not exactly to hug, but as if waiting for permission. Lillian nodded slightly. Bianca wrapped her arms around the baby, gently pulling back as if afraid of hurting her. A breath broke out. "I'm sorry. My darling. Mom is not as strong as you are." Lillian was speechless. But then, her eyes fell on the old photo on the table next to the hospital bed, a slightly blurry black and white photo, with two children. One was Bianca as a child, her hair disheveled, her eyes sunken. Next to her was another girl, smaller, her lips pursed, her hand clutching a broken plastic doll tightly. Bethany gently pushed the photo towards Lillian. "That's Bianca's hospital sister, not related by blood, but she considered her family. Her name was May, the only child that Bianca ever gave her food to. When they grew up, the two of them went everywhere together." Bianca shook her hand, said softly, her voice broken, "When you were born, May was diagnosed with terminal cancer. No relatives, no insurance. I only had two choices left. Either keep you and not know how to raise you, or give you away to try and keep May here a little longer." She bowed her head, her eyes red as if she had slept through a moonless night. "I ran away with you, escaped the hospital. But the more I ran, the more scared I became. Every siren sounded like someone was coming to take you away. No paperwork, nothing to prove you were mine. I panicked. I thought, if I took you to a safe place, at least you would live, and I would go to save May, one last time." Bethany added gently. A few weeks later, May passed away. Bianca had nowhere to return to. She lost both her sister, her child, and lost her mind while trying to find what had been lost. Lillian bowed her head. She suddenly remembered Sunny's eyes that day, not reproachful, not clingy, just waiting. As if she understood that there are losses that cannot be named, that can only be forgiven, with small hands and gentle silence. Caleb stood behind her, his hand still clutching his mother's hem tightly. But this time, he didn't cower. He stepped closer to the bed, looking at Bianca for a long time. Then he said, his voice small but sure, "She never thought you abandoned her." She waited. A long time. But she wasn't sad. Because she's like the light. Bianca cried for the first time that day, not because of pain, but because of being believed. And the child in her arms, still silent, stirred slightly, her head leaning on her mother's shoulder. Lillian turned away, her eyes red. Her hand opened, not holding back. There are moments when you don't have to be the one who gave birth to understand that. You have just done the right thing. Caleb had been standing behind his mother, holding her shirt tightly, as if he himself was holding on to something that could not be named. The boy took a step forward, then stopped. Lillian leaned down, put her hand on her son's head. Caleb looked up, his eyes calm as if he had just completed the first major task of his life. Not because of those words, but because he said them as something he had known for a long time, not something he had just learned today. A little later, when Bianca had hugged Sunny in her arms and was humming a lullaby of memory softly, Lillian sat down next to the bed. No more distance, No more prejudices. Just one woman looking at another woman who was becoming a mother for the first time, with hands that had once trembled. "You are not alone," Lillian said, her voice deep, each word as if touching lightly on the tear. "Next time you need someone, don't hide. Call. I won't let you carry it alone anymore." Bianca nodded. Tears fell, but not of guilt, but of someone who had just been forgiven by herself. Lillian leaned down, kissed Sunny lightly on the forehead. The baby's hand grabbed a strand of her hair, then let it go. "You are a little light, and I hope you will shine in the right place." She stood up, without hesitation, without looking back. On the way home, Caleb looked through the window, where the rain had just stopped. The first rays of the afternoon sun shone down on the wet asphalt road, sparkling, as if someone had just cleaned it to wait for the sun to return. "Mummy, can I draw a picture of the sun tomorrow?" "Yes, you can," Lillian replied, her hand placed on her son's shoulder gently. "What color should I draw it with to look like real light?" She thought, then replied very softly, "With the color you choose, when you know how to remember." That night, there were only 2 people in the house. The cushioned chair was empty, but the silence didn't diminish. Lillian took the crayons from the high shelf, gave them to Caleb. The boy smiled slightly, began to draw. On the paper, he drew 3 circles: a sun, a chrysanthemum, and a sleeping baby girl. No one taught him how to draw correctly, but in each messy stroke there was love, and love doesn't need to be right to be real. The living room window was ajar, enough for the wind to carry the smell of fresh grass and the dampness of late spring. In the kitchen, the kettle was whistling softly. On the dining table, there were 2 white porcelain bowls and an empty place lined with a floral cloth, as if someone was still on their way back. Lillian didn't put away the wooden cradle. It still lay next to the table, but now inside were a few stuffed animals and a storybook that hadn't been finished. Caleb didn't ask about the cradle anymore. He would just occasionally glance at it and then quietly busy himself with crayons and drawing paper. There was no sadness. There was no clinging. Just a new rhythm of life, lighter, deeper, but not cold. Almost a month had passed since Sunny left this house. No one in their family spoke about the baby by calling her by her first name. They called Sunny in other ways: the brightest drawing, sunshine on my shoulder, or simply the most beautiful empty place in our house. Every Tuesday, after taking Caleb to his drawing class, Lillian would turn the car east, stopping at Pine Hill Hospital. She worked part-time there, in a cream-colored uniform with a small name tag pinned to her chest. Bethany had been the first to bring it up in a short phone call. "If you have learned how to embrace a child that has been abandoned without blaming anyone, then I believe you can also touch many souls waiting to be seen." Lillian nodded, without needing any more reasons. She worked in the light counseling area, no treatment, no intervention, just sitting down and listening to people tell their stories when they were brave enough not to be silent anymore. Each story, each look in those rooms was like a mirror reflecting back at her. About what happens when people don't speak out early, when people try to be strong in silence, or when people believe that love will find its way back. One afternoon, when Lillian had just hung her coat on the hook, Caleb ran out from the drawing room holding a slightly wrinkled piece of paper in his hand. "Mum, look." This time the picture wasn't like the previous ones. No more dense strokes in red-orange, like a radiant sun, or circles full of laughter. The background of the paper was an old house, a sloping roof, an open window, with curtains fluttering. In the yard were 2 people, Mom and Caleb, standing next to each other. And in the upper corner, where the blue sky faded, was a soft shape, drawn in a light, blurred yellow. Not clearly a person, nor a sun, just a streak of light flying high. Lillian leaned down, gently touching the corner of the paper. "Who is that, son?" Caleb looked up, his eyes as peaceful as the sky after a storm. "It's Sunny. I draw her so she will always fly with me. Not always clearly visible, but the sunshine is still behind." Lillian said nothing. She just pulled her son close, hugging him tightly. The house was still the same old roof tiles, the walls with a few damp stains, the silver dichondra corner that was sometimes forgotten watered. But on the living room wall, right in the middle of the wooden frame hanging opposite the door, was the picture that Caleb had given. Lillian had carefully pressed it into glass, framed it, wiped every speck of dust. Under the corner of the frame, she hand-wrote a small line in black ink. "Light doesn't need to be kept. Just remember the path it has shone through." People often think love is holding on tight, but sometimes it is when we learn how to let go without breaking that love truly grows. One day, when the wind picked up and the smell of early season plums wafted from the fence in the back garden, Lillian stood in front of that picture, holding the old woolen blanket in her hand. That blanket she still kept, not washed, not folded carefully either. Just left it there, like a promise that had been kept. She turned to Caleb. "Do you still remember her?" The boy put down his brush, nodded. "I remember her with the color yellow." That night, before bedtime, Caleb brought out the new drawing again. Each stroke was a piece of unfixed memory, but somewhere there was always that faint light flying up, drawn by his small hand, so his mother could see that there are things that, even though they have gone, still remain whole in the picture, in the heart, and in the way people tell the story. Not everyone is born knowing how to be a mother, and not every love begins with readiness. But sometimes, just a child's hug, a hastily crocheted woolen blanket, or a look that touches without saying anything, is enough to rewrite the definition of family. The story of Lillian, Caleb, and Sunny doesn't need magic, just the belief that small things, when kept with love, can become a place of return for a whole life. If you are holding something fragile in your hand, a dream, a memory, a person you're not sure will leave or stay, please don't rush to let go, because maybe, like Sunny, that thing is the light, and you are the one who has chosen not to let it go out. Not everyone is born knowing how to be a mother, and not every love begins with readiness. But sometimes, just a child's hug, a hastily crocheted woolen blanket, or a look that touches without saying anything, is enough to rewrite the definition of family. The story of Lillian, Caleb, and Sunny doesn't need magic, just the belief that small things, when kept with love, can become a place of return for a whole life. If you are holding something fragile in your hand, a dream, a memory, a person you're not sure will leave or stay, please don't rush to let go, because maybe, like Sunny, that thing is the light, and you are the one who has chosen not to let it go out.